Thank you, Speaker. My question again is for the Premier. The government's Bill 31 is full of even more surprises. On page 307, the absolute last page of the budget, the last line, the government built in another massive loophole for themselves regarding what qualifies for cap-and-trade money. And sure enough, it's in the bill as well. That made it to the bill, Speaker, Schedule 3. It will allow the government to provide cap-and-trade funds now for anything it deems, quote, likely to reduce greenhouse gases. So, Speaker, they could use that money to literally pay for just about anything they plan on. So not only that, but the government, through the bill, will reassign $366 million of 2015 previous expenses to the cap-and-trade account. Speaker, to the Premier, isn't this exactly why Ontario families don't trust this government? We need them to scrap the cap-and-trade slush fund.
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, let's just be clear. So the reality is that not every.
The member from Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke is warned. The member from Leeds, Grenville is warned. The member from Lanark, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington is warned. And I have about 3 more that I'm waiting for the next move. Premier.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We've laid out a very clear plan for how we're going to move forward, Mr. Speaker. Not every part of that plan requires legislative change. So the budget lays out the areas where there is a need for legislative change. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that all of the revenue from the cap-and-trade system, Mr. Speaker, which is forcing big polluters to pay, Mr. Speaker, and pay for that pollution, Mr. Speaker, all of that money is being reinvested in homes to help people retrofit their homes, in businesses to help them to innovate, Mr. Speaker. And we believe that reducing pollution and reducing greenhouse gas emissions is an important part of our job. They do not believe that, Mr. Speaker, but we do.
Thank you. Supplementary.
To the Premier, this government has yet another surprise for Ontario businesses. In Schedule 30 of the bill, this will require small businesses to install an electronic cash register, but doesn't specify which business would be impacted. So, Speaker, the legislation would allow ministry inspectors the ability to enter their home to make sure home-run businesses are utilizing these registers and allow for stiff penalties if they aren't, up to $10,000. Speaker, to the Premier, why doesn't she trust small business owners, and why is the Premier continuing to wage a war on small business?
Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Thank you. Premier.
Mr. Speaker, well, we're actually consulting with small businesses on exactly that. But I would ask the member opposite: does he support putting more than $1 billion into mental health, Mr. Speaker? Does he support having interdisciplinary approach so that young people can get the mental health supports that they need? Does he support putting $822 million into hospitals so people can get health care faster? Does he support the notion that if young moms want to go back to work and they can't find childcare, we should put a system in place so that they can do that, Mr. Speaker? Does he support seniors having free pharmacare, Mr. Speaker? Because if he does, he might want to speak to his leader, because $10 billion taken out of all of the services that are delivered in this province not only will not allow him to support those things, but there will be teachers, there will be nurses, there will be public servants across this province who deliver those services who will no longer have jobs, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Prince Edward Hastings is warned. Final supplementary.
Back to the Premier. Sadly, none of the promises the Premier is speaking about are in the bill, Speaker. It's clear the government's budget and legislation is all about serving the Liberals' self-interest, not the interests of families or businesses. Big talk, election promises, but nothing to implement them. All aspirational, nothing operational. The Premier wrote many checks in the budget, Speaker, but the bill is proof she knows those checks would have bounced. Loopholes to allow the government to increase taxes by $2 billion on Ontario families and businesses. and loopholes to allow them to continue to pad the pockets of insiders with their cap-and-trade slush fund. It's clear this is all about trying to fool the people of Ontario just before an election. Speaker, to the Premier, the party with the taxpayers' money is over, and our message to the people of Ontario, help is on the way.
Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Thank you. Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs is warned. Premier.
You know, Mr. Speaker, the woman who came up to me when I was standing on the bridge in Pickering at the GO station, who came up to me and said, please, please make sure that you get that childcare in place. She's actually not interested in a slogan. She's actually not interested in a faulty analysis of a piece of legislation that, you know, the budget bill, Mr. Speaker, it lays out the aspects of the budget plan that need legislative change. There's a difference between policy and legislation, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure that the member opposite knows that, but he's been handed a piece of paper with a series of slogans on it, slogans that are not going to help one child get childcare, not going to help one senior get more home care, not going to help one teenager get mental health, Mr. Speaker, mental health support. Those slogans are not going to cut it, Mr. Speaker. We need to make sure that we put the supports in place that people are looking for, and what he is talking about, Mr. Speaker, is cutting across government that will not serve the people of this province.